The kin of the Leagues of Votann come in many different forms and in a variety of different places. Today we're going to be talking about my kin, the Usur, and their story. They're on an expedition to save a lost Votann that has been located, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy this. So, without further ado, let's dive into the story, and then we'll talk about the list, painting, and all that fun stuff.
Lost Ancestors. The Khal. Dogon stepped up on the small dais that stood against the fore wall of the staging deck, looking out at his warriors that were framed in the blue light reflecting from the world below. Near the front of the formation of warriors, all three of his friends stood at the head of their new units, looking up at him with the shared weight of their shared secret. Giving each of them a small smile, Dogon turned to look out over a force larger than he had ever imagined commanding, speaking with the amplified voice that he'd heard from his former calls in the past, as he tried not to look at the small drones that were carrying his words to the other ships of his small fleet. We stand on the edge of one of the greatest undertakings that many of us have ever been honoured with. Below is a world that our people haven't touched in nearly 20,000 years. It has changed hands dozens of times and, most recently, was held by the corruption of chaos that currently plagues our borders. Today, we establish a foothold for our people to push back on this evil that was left behind by Warp Storm Gaerog. Several warriors shifted under the weight of his words, many not able to meet his gaze for dozens of reasons. He drew the ancestral blade that had been given to him when his new title was officially recognised. With the still cold tip resting on the deck below him, he continued. Our scans report that our sworn enemy, the Aeldari, are already here and are currently in battle with the followers of Tzeentch near their gateway. I'm content to let them fight it out while we establish a secure landing zone in the mountains to the southwest, where our ancestors set up their base of operations. Once we're secure there, our goal will be a war of purification to be reinforced as the second wave arrives. A swell of excited murmurs rose from the younger warriors as the veterans' grips tightened on their weapons at the knowledge of what would be waiting for them. He activated the weapon as he hoisted it into the air, letting pure energy crackle along the dark star alloy as he bellowed out his final orders. Our first goal is the ancestral staging grounds. Do nothing that will jeopardize them, but be prepared for a fight. If we succeed, we'll likely have to defend this world from not only the Eldar and Chaos, but the humans and others as well. This world is special to nearly every race that remains in the galaxy for one reason or another, and we must control it if we want to continue to push our enemies back. Get on your shuttles and prepare to drop. Today, we show our ancestors that we are strong enough to stand beside them. This time, the army erupted in a cheer that was matched by the strength of their salute. After Dogon returned the salute and sheathed his deactivated blade, the army dispersed, climbing into their insect-like dropships and bulbous gunships. The organised chaos sent a wave of pride through Dogon as his warriors quickly readied themselves for the descent to the surface. He moved towards the lead Terrapin gunship, where Zatharor stood waiting with his new second-in-command. The warrior's armoured exosuit shimmered like a dark emerald in the lights of the loading ramp, despite the hundreds of battle scars that hadn't been painted over, matched perfectly with the bronze stag that crowned the teleport crest that hung over her armoured head. With a press of a button on the side of her doomed helmet, the bronze faceplate retracted to reveal Nendrud Grandbelt's tan skin and dark brown eyes as she spoke. Great speech, my Khal. Your warriors will be ready for a fight the second they get to the ground. Shall we join them so that the fleet can move to their orbital control position? Dogon gave her a warm smile before taking his own helmet from Zatharor, locking it into place with the faceplate open, before turning back to the grizzled veteran. Lead the way, Champion Grandbelt. I'm ready to get this mission underway, and the only way to do that is to launch. As the Nendrud walked up the ramp with Dogon close behind, Zatharor moved to his position on the underbelly of the shuttle and locked his iron golem suit into position for the rapid deployment from the shielded underbelly compartment. Dogon moved to the front of his ship and took his seat beside the command console that had been built into the front bulkhead of the ship. With the push of the button on the side of his helmet, he dropped his faceplate and pulled up a map of the landing zone, sending out the final orders to his Thanes and champions as his gunship lifted off the deck and pushed out into space above the planet. They dropped as Dogon worked, placing his best troops at the weak points around the launching point of his ancestors. He left his command team and a few units back in the lone building that remained, mostly covered by earth. With the fight planned as best as he could, he let his eyes drift closed for the 10-minute drop that should be uneventful, with the Eldar taking up the Chaos Fighters' attention. Dogon jerked awake as warning lights flared in his holo display, jerking against the restraints that held him in place. As the haze of sleep cleared like a paper burning in a hearth, he began to look at the alerts that were appearing on the back of his faceplate. At the centre stood a large red warning with a single line of script. Enemy contact confirmed. He dismissed the alerts before opening a channel to the flight commander, who sat on the opposite side of the firewall in the gunner's seat of the cockpit. Flight Thane Aden, can you please summarise the situation? These alerts aren't actually telling me anything. The metallic laugh of the Ironkin officer broke over his earpiece before responding. It looks like the Chaos Beasts weren't as distracted as we had hoped, but it isn't anything we hadn't planned for. I've authorised our ships to open fire, and our fighters are picking off the creatures the humans call Screamers. They can take a beating, but none of them are getting close enough to... For several seconds the channel sat in silence until the Flight Thane's voice finally returned. My apologies, Kyle, we just spotted a much larger flight of these beasts rising from the mountains below us. It looks like we're going to have to take our landing grounds by force. I recommend that we scatter so that the landing fleet can protect each other. Dogon shifted his gaze from the ground deployment map to the aerial map that showed the situation that the Aden was updating. Two small groups of red dots swirl through the block of blue dots, with a third tendril of red dots swirling up from the mountains below. When he had a clear picture of what was happening, he answered the request. I'll trust your instinct on this, Aden. Let me know if you need any of my infantry support at the gun ports. Most of the ships should have at least a few ports that we can shoot from. The sound of orders being given away from the mic was the first response he received before the voice of the Flight Thane returned to their main line. Understood, sir. Please have your warriors take up firing positions if possible. I would recommend prioritising the heavy and ranged guns if possible. We're moving into a formation that should give every gun port a good range of fire, but please make sure that no one shoots another ship if possible. An eye click on his digital display opened up the channel to all of his Thanes and linked in the Thane of Flight. When the soft beep sounded to signal that the completion had been made, Dogon spoke to the group. It looks like we're going to have a fun ride down to the surface. I'm ordering all long and heavy weapons to the firing hatches. Be careful with picking your targets carefully, since you will be shooting inside the formation. Iron golems that are equipped for flight drop in as soon as the air is thick enough to let you join in. A dozen acknowledgements echoed over the channel, and the compartment of his fighter erupted into motion. Dogon joined the organised motion, taking up a position at the firing hatch that sat just above the seat next to his. He magnetically locked his boots into place on the hard metal seats before glancing around the large hold of the gunship, where every member of his command team had a weapon sticking out of the round bubbles that gave them protected firing positions. Several blue flying ray-like creatures dove through the scattering formation, blue lightning striking from the beast's horns and tails. Beams of teal ions and tungsten darts began to return fire, punching holes in the monsters as Dogon opened a channel to Zatharor. When you're able to fly, we could use your help out there. These things are dangerous enough that we could lose some of our people if we can't get clear of these demons. Do you think that these things are the screamers that those cultists were telling us about on our last mission? The deck beneath him shuddered as the drop bay opened to let the iron golem drop into the sky, with the jetpack on its back flaring to life. Dogon let loose with purple beams from his Volkite disintegrator, striking the tail of the nearest screamer and burning straight through it. As the beast spun at the loss of its tail, the massive metal bulk of Zatharor's iron golem flashed out from beneath the gunship's wing, his twin Dark Star axes cleaving the warp beast into 3 pieces. As his firing lane cleared of enemies for a moment, Dogon reactivated his channel with the Flight Thane and relayed the information. My troops have taken their positions and have begun to fire at will. I can also confirm that the iron golems have deployed into the skies. We may be too high for them to stick with us all the way to the surface if this fight draws out, but they can at least cut down the number of enemies before they have to dock. Please, have your gunners mark priority targets for my warriors, so that we can concentrate fire in the best places possible. In response, targets began to appear marked by the pilots and their weapons officers, circling a few of the warp monsters that dove through the landing fleet. Dogon pivoted to the closest of the beasts. His range tracker told him that the screamer was still outside his range as it swung underneath the closest lander to him. The shuttle banked and turned in the space it had been allowed, trying to give any of its gunners a shot at the warp beast as it closed in on the mag coils that held the lander in the air. Dogon stood useless as unnatural blue lightning crackled from the screamer's tusks, striking the mag thruster with a sea of sparks before tusks and shark-like teeth ripped the mag coils free. The Votann ship shuddered and began to drop from its position in the formation. Dogon switched over to his channel with Zatharor and looped in the pilot of his gunship. He pushed through the view from his gun camera before speaking. Gold Squad's lander has lost one of its thrusters and is struggling to stay up. We're the closest ship to them that can do anything. Zatharor, can you clear the screamer and keep more of us while we help secure them? His Ironkin friend gave a 2-click acknowledgement before diving in at full speed, slamming his massive twin axes into the beast's back as it began to force its way inside the lander to get at the warriors inside. Zatharor kicked hard against the hull of the lander, leaving twin divots in the hardened ceramite before the beards of the axes locked deep in the blue screamer. A second yank threw the warp and metal warriors free of the ship, the twin shoulder-mounted disintegrators firing into the cluster of eyes on top of the monster's head. Dogon lost sight of the fight as his gunship moved over the wounded lander. A few moments later, a clang came from beneath the gunship as its magnetic skids locked into place on the top of the lander, allowing its stronger thrusters to help keep them both level as they dropped slowly to the ground. The 2 ships dropped faster than the rest of the fleet, cutting through the clustered ships to get to the ground as quickly as possible. The buildings began to resolve beneath them as they closed in on their target landing site. The magnetic thrusters buzzed below him as the 2 ships came down hard on the landing field before his gunship disengaged itself and shifted over to land beside its crippled friend. As the coils spun down enough to be safe to walk around, the rear ramp dropped. The command team disengaged from their firing ports and sprinted off the gunship to get the command centre set up. Dogon followed close behind, his guns swinging skyward as he looked for any threat from above. The remaining fleet of dropships swirled with the waves of blue monsters as they slowly descended to the ground. Activating his channel to all of his thanes, he gave his orders. Begin the landing process as we keep the sky clear. Gold Team, I need your light weapons teams with my bodyguard and me to clear the command centre, while the rest of you take up firing positions. Flight Thane, please try and land the heavy weapons teams first, so that we can get some good sky cover, but don't risk our people's lives if they are trapped at the upper part of the formation. Warriors from the 2 ships split, most heading towards the single-storey square building that looked out on the wide landing zones. At the main door of the command centre, the 5 Einher Hearthguard took a position on both sides of the hatch. Nindrud gave a quick countdown before spinning the locking wheel and pushing the door open. The Hearthguard charged in with weapons raised, spouting fire and bullets at anything that moved inside. 5 Hearthkin warriors pushed in behind, letting the exo-suited soldiers take the brunt of the fight as they quarrelled in tight quarters with strange beaked goatmen that had been hiding in the building. By the time Dogon was able to get into the building, the slaughter was nearly over, leaving a small group of the Chaos Warriors fighting in a tight shield wall that rimmed the corner. Dogon moved up into formation with the Einhir, raising his sword high to reach over the enemy shields. He activated the charge on the blade before hissing his order into the comms. "Crush them, so that we can be done with this." As a unit, the Einhir advanced, their swords and axes diving over and under the enemy's protection, while hammers shattered the weak wood and skin of Chaos Warriors' shields. Dogon was only able to lash out with his blade twice before the fight was over, leaving only the mangled corpses behind. Turning his back to the enemy, he walked to the centre of the room where an ancient table sat abandoned and took command again. "Get to the roof and set up firing positions. I'll have the command team clean this up before we start setting up." The trench. The Dogon sat back against the cold steel of the firing trench that his warriors had dug in a few days earlier. Exhaustion pulled at his body after 6 days of the slowly advancing warfare against the demons, leaving his forces beaten up from wave after wave of combat. The hum of a squad of maglev bikes filled the air behind his partially raised trench wall. Using one of the access hatches at the back of the trench, Dogon crawled out onto the trampled grass beyond where the 3 riders were slowing to a stop. The lead rider saluted before speaking in the dry voice of a lifelong rider. "Lord Khal, the Grimnir has sent for you. He said something about finding critical information for our mission. We were asked to bring you back as soon as possible if you weren't currently engaged with the enemy. If you would, could you please take the gunner's position on the back of my bike?" The dust still obscuring his dark green exosuit armour, Dogon holstered his disintegrator and stepped up onto the gun platform, where his boots found purchase and his legs stiffened to give him a solid firing platform as the bikes wove through the fight. As he took hold of the handles of the rotary cannon, the bikes leapt into motion. Wind whipped against the Dogon's bronze-gilded helmet as they rocketed back towards the landing platform 3 miles back from the front line. He turned to look to his left at the far line, seeing spurts of blue and purple flame mixed with explosions and the flash of tracer rounds. Dogon forced a deep breath to pull his thoughts away from the fight that his thanes had been successfully commanding since the moment they landed. He continued to search the space in front of them for any enemy that may have slipped through. With a few quick bursts, he dispatched a few men who more resembled animals than humans. The bikes slid to a stop in front of the control centre, where most of his non-combatant staff was hard at work. As the door swung open to the chaos inside, Dogon began barking orders over the hum of conversation. "I need status reports as soon as possible. That information will be critical to what comes next. Also, please get an ammo delivery over to our northwest flank. They're getting hit hard right now, and will need the help." The chaos of the room shifted to his orders, each member of his staff prioritising his commands, despite the other requirements already keeping them busy. One of the floating robotic assistants slid forward through the air to stop in front of him, its cold claw holding out a data pad to him. Dogon took the pad, quickly skimming the battle reports being funneled back to his command centre. After he finished the overview, Uruldrord stepped over to him and motioned for him to follow. The two stepped into the single office that had finally been stripped of all of the strange altars and symbols that the servants of chaos had left, leaving a barren room. When the 2 warriors were clear of all other ears, Uruldrord spoke softly. "We received word that the full control fleet has arrived in the system, and will begin dropping replacements for our warriors. Once we give our forces a little time to recover, we need to get on to our primary mission. I found our target, and it's deep into the territory controlled by the Aeldari." Dogon let a small curse slip out under his breath before activating the projector to pull up the map of the region where they needed to attack to rescue the Ancestor Core. Dogon crouched low in the thick green brush that had somehow survived the decades of chaos. The valley below crawled with thousands of Eldar moving in and out of the active webway gateway. For several moments he studied the 2 clear groups that divided up smaller groups along the side of the highway. Closer to his position sprawled an army in black and dark iron, their armour covered in spikes and hooks, while their transports looked like the seafaring ships that he'd seen on some of the ocean worlds he'd visited in his travels. The opposite side was filled with the Eldar that he'd seen before, their brightly coloured armour standing out even more against their dark allies. Slipping back down the hill, he rejoined his senior officers. He kept his voice low as he addressed the war council that waited below. This might be different from what we expected. I've heard about the Eldar that worship pain and flirt with chaos, but I'd never heard of them working with the more colourful and diplomatic Eldar that we normally deal with. To make things worse, our pointy-eared foe has decided to put the unstable warriors on this side of the valley with their backs to the mountains. Several faces darkened at the news, while several hushed conversations broke out between the lesser officers. Not wanting to let his command slip away, Dogon spoke again as he glared at the young officers who had broken decorum. They also have several heavy weapons set up on the ridge. That means that we're going to have to be creative on this attack. Remember, our only goal on this attack is to get a transporter warrior with a transporter crest close enough to our target to transport it back up to the fleet. Once we have it, we'll be withdrawing to let the Grudge fleet complete the purge of this world. Taking another step down the hill so that he was walking amongst his officers, he stopped in front of them as he addressed each of them. The Berserkers will take up position on the hillside here, and they will strike the Dark Eldar camp from this side, while the Hearthkin warriors in land fortresses advance down the canyon to the south. The Einhir will use the teleporter crests to drop in on our primary target. The most important part will be the Iron Golems though. We need you to take out the heavy weapons and Wraith Lords that are covering the valley from the far hill. The officers scattered and moved to their forces, moving them into the positions. Dogon stepped over to his Einhir bodyguards and took up his position in the centre of their formation. With a press of a button on his gauntlet, he sent the signal, launching his army into motion. A low rumble shook the side of the mountain as the 3 iron golems shot into the sky, weapons drawn for their attack. His warriors advanced with the land fortresses, and Sagitors taking the centre with their guns tracking for range, while the warriors advanced along the bushes and trees along the edge of the partially destroyed roads. As his forces opened fire on the enemy, the Berserkers leapt into motion, charging over the crest of the hill before letting out a battle cry as they let gravity carry them into the unsuspecting Dark Eldar. The shouts of the nasally, lilting tongue of the Eldari were quickly drowned out by the volume of weapons fire and the slam of metal on metal. Taking a deep breath, Dogon drew his pistol, an Ancestor's blade. When every member of his bodyguard was ready, he activated his teleporter crest. A dome of crackling blue energy expanded out from the crest that hung over his head to reach out and envelop his team. With a thunderous crack that was mostly filtered out by his helmet, the world around his team shifted. The deep, sickly forest where they'd been was quickly replaced by the sparse grass and wind-swept rock of the narrow ravine on the far ridge. Despite their thunderous arrival, the approaching battle kept the Eldar warriors facing away from the new threat. His warriors stepped out into line, raising their vulcanite disintegrators and letting the purple energy fly into the backs of the arrogant foe. Red backplates and helmets flared and disappeared as their wearers dropped to the ground, limp and no longer a threat. At a steady stride, the squad of enhanced warriors advanced as the tall enemy warriors spun to face them. Plasteel razor discs skimmed and gauged his armour as Dogon took up his position in the formation and joined the firing line, closing the distance between the enemy and their weapons. The Einhir picked up their pace, letting the weight of their armour carry them down the hill towards the Eldar Guardians that had been covering a heavy artillery position. Hammers and dark star blades flashed, cutting down the last of the enemy as one of Hearthguard leapt up onto the large gun and dropped a small charge down the barrel. Dogon finished off a few enemies that still moved as he walked away from the firing platform. As quickly as the fight began, a small pocket of calm fell over the warriors as they turned from the fight to continue down into the ravine, where the dark shimmer of hammered iron and bronze peeked through the trees. A small explosion ruptured the barrel of the artillery as the world around them was quickly filled with a thick white smoke blowing in from a copse of trees just below them. The world around them was quickly changed to a thick wall of grey as a piercing scream sent a cold chill down his spine. His bodyguard moved without orders, forming up into a ring around their Khal. A flash of white and red pulled Dogon's gaze as he let out a hissed title that was a curse. Banshees. The first lash of blades on Ceramite echoed in the fog as the Einhir to his right used his pauldron to deflect a blade that shot from the grey beyond to strike at the small, weak spot in the shoulder joint. 6 hammers lashed out with a coordinated sweep that cleared a ring around the formation, sending 2 bone-coloured warriors sprawling into the mist. Another Banshee leapt at their formation in a gap left by the strike, only to be met by the tip of Dogon's sword. The woman fell with a soft thud as Dogon withdrew his blade from her throat, giving a single order. Proc's radar is picking up these Banshees. Stay in formation, but we need to get to our target as soon as possible. We can't risk the enemy figuring out what our goal is. With the drill precision of the elite warriors they were, the team advanced. Every step was met by the slash of a blade or the ping of a molecule-thin razor bouncing off their armour. Dogon let his mind focus back onto the battle around him, watching the battle map that appeared in the upper right-hand side of the display. His forces were mostly locked in heavy combat with the enemy, each attack pressing against the long-lived and experienced Eldari. A single cry of pain over his squad's communications channel yanked Dogon back to the moment. To his right, one of his guard's hammers hung limply from the warrior's wrist, the arm limp that it was attached to. The warrior reached up and yanked a thin, silvery dagger free from the small gap at his armpit, a few small curses breaking the normally silent decorum of the channel. Dogon raised his disintegrator and let 2 shots fly into the mist, not sure if he actually hit anything. Without a word, the Khal moved to the edge of the line, pushing the wounded warrior back to the safer position, as was tradition. He let his sword hunt in the thick smoke that seemed to drift with them as they moved, relying completely on their sensor systems to warn them of enemies and point them to their target. 2 more Banshees fell to Dogon's sword and his disintegrator as he shifted toward the front of the formation. For a moment they advanced, their weapons a pure judgment against those who stood against their sacred mission. His next strike missed its mark as something hit him from behind, pushing him further into the front line of warriors. A bright teal light flashed through the fog, burning a hole before striking through the centre of their formation, near the back of the formation. The 2 warriors that protected the rear disappeared in a hiss and pop as the supercharged energy shot through them like a beam of pure starfire. Moving through some unheard signal, the remaining Banshees leapt from the smokescreen, striking all 4 sides of our formation, while one dropped from a tree branch to attack our already wounded comrade. The 2 warriors that had been protecting our rear flanks fell first, their screams of pain breaking our channel's silence as blades and shuriken rounds slipped through the joints in their armour. Dogon couldn't turn to help as 3 bone-armed warriors lunged at him, their blades well aimed at the places where his armour had given openings for joints. His sword skewered the first, the dark star alloy draining every form of energy from the fallen woman's body as he used the tug of her armour to throw her into the Banshee beside her. A third managed to get inside Dogon's guard, letting her sword bite into his knee joint. Dogon felt 2 tendons give out beneath the blade, threatening to drive him to the ground if his armour hadn't locked the leg in place to help it stay mostly intact. As he yanked his blade free of his first kill of this new fight, Dogon levelled his pistol at the warrior who had injured him and fired into her face at point-blank range. Around him, the world swam in the chaos of combat, blades clashing and projectiles splitting the air. For a moment, Dogon thought about turning to help his warriors, but the one thing that superseded the value of a life forced him forward. His people had always done everything they could to protect each life, but an ancestor core was worth dozens of armies worth of kin. He stumbled forward with only 2 of the 10 warriors that had transported in with him at his side. The 2 warriors fired blindly into the mist at anything that moved, keeping the enemy away as they stepped into the gap between trees that were filled with the massive metal machine. Dogon put his back to the device, giving his team the retreat signal that would automatically teleport them before activating his own teleport them back to the waiting ship above. When all but the 2 who stood beside him disappeared in a flash of blue, he activated the channel to his forces in the area. The mission has been accomplished. Fall back and brace for incoming orbital bombardment. You have 10 minutes to get clear. As the last words left his mouth, his teleporter crest flared and enveloped everything for 50 feet around him.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and yes, I did take some liberties. Leagues of Votann don't have a lot of models, and at the time that was written, the Steeljacks hadn't come out either. The Steeljacks are kind of in that same vein, but I was thinking more Dreadnought-sized with the Iron Golems. But next, let's talk about the background lore and what we actually have with this Leagues of Votann army. The Usur are a league inside the Leagues of Votann that focus heavily on recovery and artifact strengthening, as well as mineral research and land control. They're focused on the history of Votann as well, trying to find any connections they can to their ancestors so they can strengthen their ancestral cores and build them out and stabilize them to allow for a lot more growth and structure. This leads them into regular contact with humans and the Tau, allowing them to exchange goods and products, as well as information for anything that may hint towards an ancestral connection or something that comes along the lines as an artifact, part of a Votann, or in the case of the story, the Votann as a whole. They have a massive hatred for the elves because the Drukhari and the Eldar both did not let them settle on a bunch of worlds on the fringes that would have allowed them to stabilize and recover during the initial push that pushed the Votann deep into the galactic core. But throughout all of this, they've stayed strong and they've stayed focused on what really matters to them. And that is finding the Votann and finding their ancestral cores and preserving their posterity. With all of this, Leagues of Votann don't actually have a ton of lore besides a single book. So this one was a lot of fun because I could do pretty much whatever I wanted story-wise. Keep in mind, this is fan fiction, it is not canon. So don't take that and run with it, but I think you guys will actually enjoy the story as well. Keep in mind as well, if you want to actually read the physical story, it is available on my Patreon for free. The link is in the description below, and you'll be able to find a bunch of cool stuff there. But before we dive into the army list and the paint scheme and the tactics that I use for my particular Leagues of Votann army, let's talk about the tool I use in order to make these videos possible, vidIQ. You guys may not have noticed lately, but I've been working on leveling up my YouTube channel to a whole new level, and because of that, the tool I've been using to do that has reached out to me and actually wants to affiliate with me, which is wonderful. And that is vidIQ. vidIQ is a software that specializes in leveling up your YouTube channel. It's been a long YouTube journey for me, and I'm not here because I want to blow up and become YouTube famous. That's not what I want. I'm here because I like to share my passion for Warhammer 40k lore and talk about the things I can't really talk about with my friends. A lot of my friends who play Warhammer 40k are a lot more casual than I am when it comes to lore, and being able to do these deep dives and talk about lore accurate armies and things like that isn't something I can do in my daily life. So I'm here. And because of that, I wanted to find all of you guys that are the same way. And that's what drove me to vidIQ. vidIQ is an amazing tool that gives you access to thumbnail idea generators, script outline generators, which we're actually using for this current video. It also helps you with a lot of the back-end stuff, things like tags and keywords and making sure your descriptions are accurate and detailed. All these little things are little minor tricks that help me find more of you. In the last few months since I've started doing this, I've had multiple videos reach over 5,000 people, which beforehand, if you go look, even a year ago, I was reaching maybe 100 if it was a good video. So vidIQ has really made a difference and helped me refine my skills through various trainings and tools so that I can share my videos and my love with you guys. So if this is something that intrigues you, if you want to be able to share your videos and your interests with more of the general public, there's a link down in my description that will take you to an awesome affiliate site and help you guys get set up. There are free options as well as different paid options that you can do, and I definitely recommend checking them out and figuring out what's best for you. Now let's get back to the video that vidIQ helped me create. So the list that I used for this is going to be super similar to the one you saw on my lore accurate list for the Call's Oath. The Leagues of Votann don't have a ton of variety in them. And when I built out this list, there were a few models that were missing. A few of the Berserker models that would have been fun in this story, as well as other Chthonian models and the Steeljacks. So eventually I may revise this list and tweak it. I'm not sure. I haven't been having a ton of fun playing the Leagues of Votann for a while, and they've been kind of sitting on the shelf while I've been playing my Night Wardens, as well as my Imperial Knights, which are kind of hidden at the moment. But with all that said and done, the list is a pretty simple one. This list opens up with a call that's going to be representing our main character. We're also going to have a Grimnir, an Einhir Champion, and a Brockir Iron Master. Those are going to make up our leaders, with the call obviously as our warlord. On top of that, we're going to have 6 boxes of Hearthkin Warriors. We're going to get a bunch of this block moving so we can do a lot of board control that way. Then we're going to have a box of Brockir Thunderkin and 2 boxes of Chthonian Berserkers. These Berserkers are going to be a big part of what we're wanting to do as far as quick actions and being action monkeys. They're also pretty punchy, although they are kind of glass canyons on the tabletop. On top of that, we're going to have a squad of Einhir Hearthguard, a squad of Hearthkin Jaegers. That is a kill team box, but it still looks fantastic. It's one of my favorite parts of that army. We're also going to have Hearthkin Pioneers, a Land Fortress, and 2 Sagittars. This list is going to be a pretty straightforward one for a Votann army right now with all of the rules, and they're going to play pretty straightforward. I like playing the Votann sometimes, but the current rules have kind of taken away their punchiness, and they've turned into a horde army, which I don't actually like. If you play dwarves in any other tabletop game, they tend to be the big, thick, punchy, slow-moving army that people struggle to do damage to, but they also can't control the board well. And I think that feeling is missing with the Leagues of Votann. I wish they had gone that direction and they turned them into big, chunky units, because groups like the Einhir Hearthguard would be a lot more fun if they were the Longbeards of Old World, or the Ironclads of Old World. Units that can ruck up and stop and take a beating and then give a beating back. That's what they should be, but they're not. They should be the Terminator equivalent, but they really aren't. And I think that's a miss on Games Workshop's side, but we'll see what happens when the next edition comes out. I'm hoping that changes. Next, let's talk about how much this list is going to cost you, and then we'll talk paint schemes and tactics. So this list is a pretty interesting one. It's not the most expensive list you're going to see, and currently, if you saw my video last week, it's actually decently priced. The Leagues of Votann aren't a staggering, astronomically expensive army to build if you build it right, but that involves a lot of vehicles and heavy units in order to get this price down. As it sits right now, current retail, that cost is going to be $1,172.50. So not a massive discount, but it's sitting on the less expensive side. And if you go through the value retailers, it's going to cost you $1,011.45. So it's pretty nice and get you a little bit of a discount. There are ways you can go fluffy and try and save a little bit of money, but I wouldn't recommend that for these guys in particular. So next, let's talk about how you're going to paint it and the tactics you're going to use on the tabletop. Okay, so now that you've bought the army, you know how much it's going to cost you. Let's talk about painting. If you're going to do it based on my story and my units, I went with dark green, khaki, and bronze. I also used some black metallics on the weapons as well. So it's a pretty simple paint scheme. I used AK's black green for the armor. I used Games Workshop's, I can't remember the actual name, but it's the khaki color, or the olive green color, that really fills things out for the cloth, which you can see better here on my Grimnir. And then I used Army Painter Metallics for the rest. The bronze is weaponized bronze. I used that on the accents and the colors to really bring out that contrast with the greens. And then, as you can see here on Buri, I used Night Scale to accent the weapons. Now, if I wanted to power them, I could always go back through with They're teal metallics and give it lightning strikes, which I may do eventually. I obviously also need to base them. They're just painted bases right now. Compared to my other armies, they kind of look kind of sad. I did have a lot of fun figuring out how to do the Tyranids on here. And I think High Fleet Jormungandr is going to be the High Fleet that my armies are all going to face. So if there's Tyranid bits anywhere on there, it's going to be Jormungandr yellow and black. So let me know what you guys think of the paint schemes as well. I think this is one of my better painted armies. Although I think the Knights and the Night Wardens are probably my best ones yet. I'm super excited about them. The Thousand Suns turned out pretty well too. I just wrapped those up recently with a Hellbrute and a Rhino, which you can kind of see in the background there. But the nice part of this army is tactically you can do pretty much whatever you want as long as your codex allows it. It's a pretty generic build that lets me use different attachments across the board, whether I want to go Chthonian Berserkers more, or I want to lean into the more Einhir Hearthguard side. I can do that with the Grobmus detachment. None of them play super well. It's a very tactically savvy army build that takes a lot of effort and time to figure out exactly how you want to do it. So if you're interested in Leagues of Votann, let me know in the comments below what type of army you have, how you want to paint it, anything like that. The best part with Leagues of Votann is there's not a lot of lore, so how you want to paint it and how you want to play it is pretty much entirely up to you. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Make sure you go check out the full written story in our Patreon. The link is in the description below. And go check out vidIQ. They have a fantastic tool for anyone who's wanting to get into YouTube and market your videos better. And I will see you guys in the next one.